This is my new workbench, and after 3 months of work, it's finally complete. And in this video, I'd like to tell you all about it. Not just what it does, but also why I built it, and why it's not in my primary woodshop. I've had a lifelong interest in woodworking, but it's only recently that I've started taking it more seriously. I live on what used to be a tiny farm, and we have a barn where I have set up a woodshop that's slowly expanding, but being an old hay barn, when winter comes around, fine woodworking really has to step aside. Woodworking isn't exactly an activity well suited for the living room or the kitchen. You pretty much need a dedicated space for it. As I'm not quite ready to spend a year's salary on building a climate-controlled shop in the barn, I have to figure out something else in the meantime, in order to keep on woodworking. But if your space is annoying to use or just plain unsuitable for woodworking, you're probably going to find yourself doom scrolling on your phone instead. So, last winter, I started converting a room in the basement into a tiny woodshop. And no woodshop is really complete without a proper workbench. And now, almost a year after I started working on this room, the bench is finally done. This is the finale in a series of videos of me building this bench. Now, there are a few build steps I have done since the previous video, but I'll show you those as we're discussing the relevant parts of the bench. But why don't we start off with a brief summary of the bench? I built the bench using ash, and there are also some elm and oak accents. And fun fact, the ash and the elm used to grow just a stone's throw from this house. When I designed this bench, I was referencing a bunch of different Scandinavian workbenches. But instead of the shoulder vise you might traditionally find on these, I went with a more plain face vise. For the tail vise, I went with an L-shaped vise design that has 2 clamping surfaces and works with the dog strip. On the top of the bench, I have a series of holes drilled for holdfasts. And I did go with the tool tray. The leg assembly of the bench is using a tension rod system that provides exceptional rigidity against racking forces. Now, this room is very small, so I had to make sure the bench was small enough so it's still usable in this space, but also big enough that it's not too small to use. Since I started making this video, I have completely rearranged this room, and so I hope those continuity errors aren't going to be too distracting. One of the more interesting parts of this bench is the tail vise, as it's a bit of a more uncommon design here on YouTube. And I'm not gonna lie, that is one of the reasons why I wanted to build it. And I really wanted a crack at designing and building one. I had no idea if I could make it work myself, but I think the results speak for themselves. If you ask me, the minimum required for a tail vise is to work with a dog strip, to give you a clamping surface against the flat top of the bench. I made the dog strip by routing channels in the board before I glued it onto the top. Some tail vises only have the dog strip, and others might have a more of a face vise or a Moxon vise style of a clamping surface. But with an L-shaped tail vise, you actually get 2 separate clamping surfaces in addition to the dog strip. The inner vise jaws here are directly in line with the vise hardware, so that provides a very strong clamping surface with no racking whatsoever. While it might be a bit limited on space, it is very good for clamping furniture legs and other stick-shaped parts. Another thing this excels at is when you need to rip a board, then you can saw through the entirety of the board without having to reclamp it. And you'll be sawing in a direction where the bench most resists racking forces. And this other clamping surface I can use for wider pieces, where the rods of the face vise might otherwise interfere or cause racking. And this gets back some of the functionality the shoulder vise otherwise would have given me. Although I am a bit more limited on space here, as wider pieces would hit the wall. But I don't think I'll be building very large projects in this room anyway. I'll probably save those for the part of the year where I can work in the larger woodshop. During construction of the tail vise, I encountered a fatal flaw in the design that I had come up with. Comes through there. I'm not gonna screw it all the way in because it's... That's one thing I didn't consider. Right. That's a bit annoying. Good thing I caught that. Mounting this tail vise is not going to be possible. Also, I'm also realizing now that this is going to interfere with my dog that I want to put there. So yeah, this design kind of doesn't work. The dog holes are going to be one here and one further back. Unfortunately, I did a measurement error because I was a bit grumpy. This is going to have to end somewhere here. I'm probably going to do like a miter. So yeah, the corner of the tail vise looks a bit funky. I had to shift where the bench dog went in the tail vise, but in terms of functionality, I think this is the way to go, as I got a bit of extra length for the dog strip. I would have liked to have a few extra holes for bench dogs, but the rest of the space is taken up by the face vise hardware and the front left leg. I'll have to spend some time building projects with this bench to see if I need that extra space or not. And I still have the larger workbench in the barn. As I mentioned earlier, I went with a more simple face vise rather than the perhaps more traditional Scandinavian shoulder vise. I already complicated the design with the tail vise, so a simpler face vise was the way to go. And I'm not really sure if I like the shoulder vises anyway. There's really nothing special about the face vise, it's just a piece of oak and a pretty basic face vise hardware kit. However, in my attempt at shimming it straight, I went a bit too far. So why don't we go back a couple of days and see how I fixed that. As you can see, I shimmed it a bit too aggressively, so now it's leaning this way instead. Previously it was leaning the other way, but now it's leaning too far in. It's binding here. I think it's related to the shimming, but I'm gonna ream these out anyways. So I used these washers as shims before. So this is slightly thinner. Just taping this one on underneath there. See what that does, and I can adjust this and double it off if it's necessary. High tech. Now it closes nicely. It just starts at the top just a tiny bit before the bottom. The only thing I might regret with this bench is that I chose to go with vise hardware that does not have a quick release function. But I think I can live with that. For the legs, I only have 2-inch ash available to me here in the barn, but I doubled it up to get some extra thickness. And it's a big tenon going down to the base plate and dowels through that, and it's very stable. Then there's a short stretcher here, which is an offcut, and it's dovetailed into each leg at the top. Now, for the main attraction of this leg assembly, you have the tension rod system. And what that means is there is a threaded rod going through all of these 4 longer stretchers. These are 2 pieces glued together, but before I glued them together, I routed a half-round channel on each side, and then gluing it together, I get a full hole throughout the entire stretcher, sized slightly larger than the threaded rod I used. From the outside of each leg, you have bolts tensioning it down, and that keeps it very strong. I guess that's the modern day equivalent of a tusked tenon, and that's something you'll find on a lot of traditional workbenches, and especially on the Moravian workbenches. And here on the top is where the main action happens. Anyways, the main working area of the bench is about 50 centimeters or just under 20 inches deep. 69 centimeters deep if you include the tool tray. Nice. And the bench ended up 153 centimeters wide, 60 inches. Although I did aim for 150 centimeters, so not sure at what point I mismeasured that. The thickness of the bench is 70 millimeters, which is just under 3 inches. But to make mounting the tail vise possible and add some extra beefiness to the front, starting with where the tail vise mounts, I added some extra thickness. So these front 4 boards are 110 millimeters thick, which is 4 1/3 inches. I wanted this bench to have a tool tray, even though some people claim it only serves as a place to collect your trash, and of course, to some extent it does do that. I sized the tool tray to be able to fit smoothing and jack planes laying on their side. The bottom of the tray is pine shelving material that I have dadoed into the rear apron of the bench. And then it's fastened underneath the bench top with some lag bolts and oversized holes. I think the bench top looks amazing now that it's flattened and got some finish on it. However, this section here didn't always used to look this good. In fact, I was quite bummed out by how this thing looked like. When I was selecting boards for the dog strip section, I was down to the last 2 boards I had milled up, and they were not really the best for the job. I was too lazy at the time to break down another slab, so I stuck with the ones I had chosen. But the tear out in the grain here was just so severe, there was just no way it was ever going to be smooth and flat. Let's take another flashback and see what I did to remedy this. I did opt to clamp these down with some screws. So once the glue is dry, I'm going to take these out and drill for dowels. And I think that looks a lot better. I'm glad I took the time to inlay these new pieces. And that leads me to the last part of finishing this bench, flattening the top and adding some finish on it. I did all the flattening by hand using a number 4 and a number 7 plane. It was quite the workout and it was about half an hour of continuous planing. In a perfect world, I would have used a smoothing plane all the way instead of sanding the top. But my skills at sharpening, tuning, and actually using hand planes aren't there yet. But I strive to be there in the future. And I also just needed the bench to be done. If you have any comments or questions regarding the bench, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you guys in the next video. Now, just one final thing before I sign off. I am putting some kind of a diagram with dimensions up on my website for this bench. So if you want that, I'll have a link for it in the description of the video. So, bye.
Pushing me, she keeps on pushing me. Yeah, I think I'm gonna break.